Is going to be here is here. Now, Adam and Sarah are 2/3 of the founders of Intopia. I don't know who the other third person is, some strange person, but it's all good. Now, Sarah, if you haven't come across her before, she's basically a walking encyclopedia when it comes to WCAG and all the component elements to it. Adam, on the other hand, he's a little bit different. He has his tank wheelchair here, and so broadly speaking, when he comes across people who aren't doing the right thing, he tends to roll over them as well. So between the two of them, they love to have vigorous debates about the right way of implementing accessibility. So today, they're going to simulate a little bit of that in the sense of an ARIA and custom component showdown. So I'm going to hand it over to the two of you, and I'll leave it to you.
Hey everyone. As Stuart mentioned, we thought we would come here today and actually talk a little bit about ARIA and custom component showdown. So it's really not uncommon for Adam and I to have long, lengthy debates about all things related to ARIA, custom components, and even a bonus one that you will get to at the end, which has nothing to do with ARIA or custom components, but is actually a technicality of WCAG and what we thought. So we thought we would share this with you. Now, Adam, kind of blunt. Does anyone know Adam? Has anyone worked with Adam? Yeah, we've got sort of about 10 people. So, blunt, do I have yeses for blunts? Yeah, we've got quite a few nods, you know. So in our conversations, if I hear about General ARIA shittiness once more, I'm going to kill him. Seriously? Done. Don't care if he's a co-director, we'll work out the legalities on the side. He tends to be a little bit stubborn, so often I'm, trying to make the case for, why something should be in one way or another. And he's fairly opinionated about it. So you go up to him and ask him about how he feels about some of this kind of thing. He is not going to hold back. So if you want to be bombarded at lunchtime, maybe run over, you can do so.
Yeah, and if you want the complete opposite of that, so if you want someone who's reasonable and listens to what the other person's saying and kind of is flexible in implementation, so says, we can't necessarily do this, but we might be able to do that, or sort of someone who can keep an open mind and be respectful throughout the whole process, that's Sarah. We get on really well, and it seems to work for us.
We went into business together, so obviously something's working. So this is often where we find ourselves in some of these conversations. And what we wanted to share today is 5 examples of some of the conversations that we have had. Sometimes we come out on the same side of things. Occasionally, I think we're still in debate. So the examples today are anonymous, but they have been taken from real-life examples of clients that we have worked with and also discussions that we've had. So, first one, and this is not a new one, it was mentioned by Cordelia. I'm pretty sure I ducked into the end and I saw Russ mentioning it and Ben Buchanan next door as well. So, Adam, I have this website, someone's brought us in at the end of the project, surprise, surprise, really happens so often. And the whole website has very little semantic markup. So everything's divs and spans, there is no button markup, there is no links, all of our radio buttons are just pretty much inaccessible. No keyboard accessibility, no semantics. I think though I'm going to have to actually repair with ARIA. So we're going to have to do things like those buttons, we're going to have to add a role equals button and links with the role equals link as well.
Why? That's what a button's for. I mean, the W3C, you've given us a spec to do this thing. You use ARIA, you're going to have to add your own focus indicators, you're going to need to make it keyboard focusable, adding tab index, you're then going to have to use JavaScript to do all the interactions. I mean, come on, that's what a button's for.
Yes. So I know that, and I actually totally agree, but I've got the dev saying that the cost of actually adding all this extra stuff using ARIA and JavaScript is less because they don't actually have to change the unit test quite so much.
Where?
Sounds like an excuse to me.
Thanks, that's really great.
Yeah.
You're so sympathetic to my case.
Yeah.
So, real life scenario, we did repair with ARIA. I'm not going to say we didn't, but at the same time, we know that if you've got a perfectly good native element and you're baking in accessibility, as Cordelia mentioned, then we should be using those native elements. There is going to be a higher development effort for custom components. So a simple example of a button, which has come up, as I mentioned in other presentations, we're going to have to make it keyboard focusable. We're going to have to manage keyboard accessibility with scripting. That is going to add to both the effort, and I was in Ben's presentation next door, and he was talking about code quality as well, and how introducing, I guess, all of these elements means that there is more chance of things going wrong. But in my case, we had to use custom components, and we did repair with ARIA. So I was very, very strict on we have to test everything with assistive technologies. So for this project, it was a desktop-only project at this stage. So we defined which screen readers and web browsers we were supporting. We actually included both JAWS and NVDA, noting that with the heavy reliance on ARIA, we were only able to test with one version of JAWS just due to timing. This was a crazy project with timelines. And so we also had NVDA as a fallback. Not saying that it's good to ask people to swap out different assistive technologies, but that was sort of, I guess, our risk management approach.
Buttons are so much better. So much better.
Back in your box.
So, Sarah, I'm building this accessible auto suggest, or it's supposed to be accessible for suburb and town search, and I kind of need you to look over my markup.
Yeah, no problems. So, have you read the spec?
Well, I tried, but, you know, it's generally kind of shitty.
Okay, let me go and have a look at the ARIA design patterns in the ARIA specification. And oh look, it says we should have a role equals combo box. How could you miss that?
Well, I didn't really miss it, but I put it on there, and, you know, 1.0 says you put it on the input field, and 1.1 says you put it around the container that contains the input field, and you've got issues with JAWS, and sometimes it speaks the label, and sometimes it doesn't. And going off Russ's presentation, I don't think he used it, so, you know.
That's because he's a loser.
And he doesn't read the spec. Maybe. Yeah, okay. Let's actually also send it through some usability testing. So not only do we see that it doesn't always work consistently with JAWS, I've just tested with a few VoiceOver users, and they found the field fine. They double tapped on it, but none of the usual prompts that they normally look for, like the fact that it's editing, insertion point at start, insertion point at end, the things that VoiceOver usually announces to say, hey, look, you're now editing this field, the QWERTY keyboard has actually popped up, and the users just sat there and go, I don't know what I'm doing. They navigated past the field, they navigated back to the field, they tried it again. They just didn't know that it was now in editing mode and the QWERTY keyboard was up.
Yeah, I told you.
Fuck off. Okay, I'll concede. We're not going to use combo box.
Well, so I was right there.
Yeah. So one of the things is that usability testing is a must to understand your user's experience. So even though with the example, for instance, with JAWS, we found quite specific issues with specific combinations, and we could detect those. With VoiceOver, though, it wasn't actually something that we detected until we sat in usability testing. And it was a no-brainer once we saw it. It was like, oh my God, how could we have missed the fact that there was something key that wasn't being announced? But we're not always walking WCAG encyclopedias or walking accessibility encyclopedias. So showing that really, just people sitting there and going, I have no idea what's happening, I can't search, that's it, obviously highlighted this to me. Usability should always trump standards and guidelines. So I don't really care if it fails a WCAG guideline if it's going to be more usable and you've done your usability testing and your due diligence and all that kind of thing, then break the standards and break the rules.
That's something we absolutely agree on.
Hey!
Hey. There you go. First
High
one.
five.
Yep.
Why would you put a role equals combo box on an NFT?
Well, that's what the spec tells us to do.
And that's kind of the point. So the ARIA design pattern for an auto suggest, the rule or the recommendation is to put a roll of combo box on it because it's got the auto suggest options that actually sort of appear. And there's other ARIA attributes that work in tandem with that to say, is this editable, is it not editable? So i.e., is it masquerading more or less as a select box? But this is that demonstration of following the standards and the guidelines like that blindly and not looking at the implications on users and also the support from different assistive technologies. It's a no-brainer to look past that and break the rules where necessary.
Yeah, all right. So I've got this menu that I'm working on, and the devs have put role equals menu bar and role equals menu item and role equals menu everywhere, and it kills me because it's kind of shit. They've just done it because it's got submenus.
Everything's shit for you, isn't it?
Well, it is, but I mean, we went through that in the opening slide.
Yeah. So ARIA isn't always shitty though. I mean, I can see where there might be problems with this, but why do you think this implementation is terrible?
Well, because they're not links anymore, right? They're menu items. So when a user's going through and trying to use the link list in the screen reader, for example, they get nothing because it's not part of that list of links anymore, which will make it harder for them to navigate because, you know, a link should take you somewhere.
Yeah.
And you're not in an application, you're in a website.
Yep. Okay. I'll wear that. But you can't tell me that there's not like certain ARIA attributes like ARIA expanded that are absolutely awesome for instance, for telling the screen reader when something is expanded, like a level 1 menu item or and can be expanded or collapsed.
Yeah, that one's kind of cool. I like that one. But I guess, I mean, with the menu design pattern, right, you've got to use the arrows to expand. And how do you tell a non-screen reader keyboard user that they need to use the arrow keys to expand the menu?
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. I mean, no one's going to go to your accessibility statement and read, how to access my menu. You know, who does that? Does anyone do that? Does anyone go to help when they want to browse a website? No. One shrug, few shaking of heads.
I think if they need help, we've done it wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's got to be true.
Yeah.
So, rules of thumb for this one is less is often more. To come back to Cordelia and the cinnamon example, often it's what I call ARIA cowboys and cowgirls. They ride in and they think, oh, I've got this fantastic solution, I've seen this fantastic thing, and let me just, chuck out a few ARIA attributes. And sometimes they care where they land and sometimes they really don't. God, I've seen it all. But, just because there is something there like role equals menu bar, that it's the right implementation in every single solution. Beware of the unintended consequences of applying ARIA attributes. So it's not always common, I would say, for someone, for instance, to bring up a list of links. They're probably checking, is it semantically meaningful, is it a link or not, but not necessarily what have we overrode and what impact will that have on the user. And new interaction patterns might not always be clear to users. So in the menu bar example, more often than not, that is navigated by a keyboard using the up, down, left and right arrow. And that doesn't always translate. People are in a website view used to tabbing through menus and opening them using sort of enter to expand to level 2 items. And I think one of the really common sort of frustrations that Adam and I have, gosh, I'm doing a lot of talking. Do you want to do any frustrations of level 1 items that go to landing pages and...
Yeah, it's really annoying when you've got a level 1 item that A expands the submenu, but then B is also acting as a trigger point, as supposed to be a link to go to another place, because how do you code that for a keyboard user? How do they expand it, particularly in the case of an on-screen reader user? For a screen reader user, you could, if you had to, you could use ARIA to describe the way of opening the menu, and then the way of actioning that top level. But for someone without that waterford feedback, how do you do that? And I've seen it done before where hitting enter once will open the menu, hitting enter again or execute once will open the menu, hitting enter again or execute and move to that page. But really, it's not great. Don't do it.
And that's where the retrofitting accessibility comes in. I think that's where the use of like menu bar, that kind of thing is rife across the web, where people have mega menus and they haven't designed it to be accessible, and they've designed it so those level 1 items serve 2 functions. And then in order to make it accessible, they use the menu bar, and they use then the sort of extended keyboard interaction of enter and arrow keys. But it doesn't always, it doesn't translate for users. So users will press enter, expecting to, for instance, for the mega menu to open. Instead, it will take them somewhere. They probably go back, they might try again, but there's no guarantee that they're actually going to get that right. And if that's the only way you can navigate is via those level 2 menu items to get to alternate pages, you've essentially blocked people. From a WCAG compliance perspective, I can't fail it. We can't fail it. It is still keyboard accessible, because you can still press enter, you can still use the down arrow keys to open it. So from the letter of WCAG, can't fail it. On a usability side though, we've seen time and time again where it just doesn't work for users. So I have this website and it's using the ARIA tabs design patterns. So old school tabs, we couldn't really do much with them. We kind of faked them a little bit. We might have had some screen reader only text that said, Nice from, as the first tab is in this example. You might have said that it was a tab, but it was really just still a link. But what I've seen on this site is they're actually using the role of tab list, tab and tab panel to actually mark up tabs. But this is also changing the interaction. So when a user actually tabs to the tab panel, it will move focus to the item that's selected. In the example, Niels from. Then you use the arrow keys, left and right, or up and down if you had vertical and horizontal tabs, to actually navigate through the tabs.
Yeah, I can give you some insight into this. We did some usability testing as part of a project that I was in, and that code was awesome. It was probably the most compliant ARIA code I've ever seen, but you put it in front of the user and they had no idea how to interact with it. None at all. And I don't know, maybe it was the version of JAWS we were using and maybe it got better over time, but you tab into the tab panel and it says tab panel, tab 1 of 4, but didn't really say much. And then you hit tab and there was focusable things inside the tab panel, so the tab actually went into the tab panel and the user was trying to switch tabs and couldn't work out how, and it was only after about 3 tries that they realised, well, they've got to do it with the arrow keys.
It's really interesting because my understanding is that the ARIA tab design pattern is actually based off the way tabs work within our operating system. So if you open, a dialogue in Windows, for instance, that's actually how it works. So why isn't this knowledge transferring across?
Well, because one's an operating system and an application, and the other one's a website. And let's be honest, websites aren't apps, shouldn't be apps. If you are building a web application, I think that's probably a different thing because you set those expectations. But really, I wouldn't be using the design pattern for a website. It's kind of shit.
Can't I just have one? Can you let me win once?
Oh look, I'm not saying you can't use it. I just say I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's a great company look. Sarah says you can use tab panels. Adam says you can't.
Well, but you said before, right? So it's completely compliant and we can't fail it. So they can use the design pattern. I just, wouldn't personally.
All right, I'll give you that one. So some of the things, ignore the visuals. Just because it looks like a tab doesn't necessarily mean it actually is a tab. It's almost like, for me, closing my eyes and saying, okay, what is the actual function of this? So don't get caught up by sort of visual designs. Look beyond them. We might think interaction patterns transfer from operating systems to web, but it doesn't always happen. And the question I don't think either of us have resolved is, if we are introducing new interaction models like this, when is that expectation, I guess, that a user might have crossed over? So, and how do we do that? Like, my understanding is not very many users go back for refresher courses. And particularly, although we can sort of help screen reader users in some ways, so JAWS has like hints that will help in some of these new interaction patterns, it's our sighted keyboard users that it gets really, really tricky for. Because again, where do we put those instructions, and should we really be putting instructions in there? So I don't think this one's resolved for either of us.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I can actually see how the new tab design pattern is good. I really don't know where that cutover point is.
Yeah, and I love that bit of code we put together in the beginning. It was awesome. Flawless. But you put it in front of the user, it didn't work. Yeah. So this one's an interesting one. I've got an abbreviation. And the abbrev tag in HTML, or the element tag, whatever it is, what are we calling them these days? Elements. With title is how we're told to mark it up. But it's not keyboard accessible. So I don't know, because you're going to have keyboard users that miss out on that abbreviation.
So you're asking me if it passes or fails?
Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, you are walking WCAG, right?
I just need a little WCAG sign above me. Well, look, I mean, I know one of the sufficient techniques for abbreviations, which is a AAA requirement, actually says that you can use the abbrev tag. Totally acceptable from a technique point of view. But, you know, what happens if you've got a sighted keyboard user, and let's say in this case we've got the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, abbreviated as IAAP, do they think it's the IAAP, International Association of Administrative Professionals, from Google, or the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, or the International Association of Applied Psychology? The last one. What, we all need our heads read? So I actually think that in some ways we can fail it for keyboard 2.1.1, because I know that that's what's recommended, but ultimately it's not keyboard accessible. And if particularly, you know, you need this information. If the context is not clear and this is all you're relying on to understand what an abbreviation means, then I hate to say it, but I'm probably on the side of failure.
Yeah, see, I knew you were going to say that, and I can kind of agree, but I kind of feel dirty doing it, because you're going to have to put a tab index on an abbrev element. You know, like...
Just spell it out, you know, well, in text?
Yeah, but, you know, then visually you're going to have issues with the people who go, oh, no, it doesn't look as good if you...
You're supposed to let me win one.
No, I agree with you. I'm just saying.
I actually remember this conversation. I was in the car and I think it was 20 minutes later. We're going back and forth to arrive at this point. So it's not only custom controls and ARIA that can be questionable, particularly from a compliance point of view. My default is always ask what's the impact on the user. Always come back to that. So really, like Cordelia said, a spoonful of cinnamon isn't very nice. A sprinkling of cinnamon can do wonders. ARIA should be used in the same way. It definitely enhances things, and we definitely need to use it for certain things like our auto-suggest. We really couldn't do what we need to do for something like that without including ARIA, but it's almost a use with caution. And we don't have any nice illustrative skills, so we have really boring slides. Thank you.
We're still friends, right?
I want a bribe.
All right, it's all right. We'll work something out, chocolate or wine or something for sure.
Yeah, okay. Chocolate and wine I can do.
Yeah. Or cheese and wine. There you go. That's
Cheese
what
and
I
wine?
meant to say.
Yeah. Cheese, chocolate and wine?
Yep. Cool. All right.
Thank you.